morning, everybody. We are in week 3. This is fantastic. So you guys have read 72 Psalms at least, which is pretty cool.
They all sound alike.
They all sound alike. Yeah. I love that you're noticing some patterns and kind of taking it as a book of poetry, taking it as a book of collections. That's kind of how we're reading it. It's cool to do that. I think most of us grow up with a relationship with the Psalms being that we, maybe hear one or two in church, or we hear lyrics that have been taken from the Psalms and used in hymns, but we very rarely do we sit down and read it the way you're reading it. And that's a monastic practice. Monks do this, nuns do this. But most of us mainline faiths, it's never kind of mentioned. So I think that's why it's fun to do it this way. And we were talking earlier, Nona was saying she's noticing the tone improving as we move through the book. And you will see that. I love that you're noticing that. And remember, this is kind of a metaphor for the life of faith. The book of Psalms, when you read it cover to cover, to me becomes a metaphor for, we start out wrestling. In fact, Psalm 1 and 2 kind of start out with this royal God, right? Up kind of on a throne far away, which is kind of a childhood, maybe impression of God, a judge, a scorekeeper. Many of us grew up as children with that image of God. And then we kind of go into the adult years where we start to struggle and see real life. And that's reason to lament often. And then we start to move into realizing the bigger picture of gratitude and where God has been present in our lives. And we start kind of arcing more towards God later in life. And you will see that the Psalms do that too, that the arc towards praise and gratitude and, grace and recognizing forgiveness and forgiving others. As we work through the whole book, the 150 Psalms, you will begin to see the tone change. And I love that you're seeing that in book 2. Book 3 and 4 are the shortest. So you get a break the next 2 weeks. You only have 2 to 3 Psalms a day, no more 6s. So if you have made this a practice, or if you haven't been able to keep up, then maybe use this time with the shorter books to go back. But I really hope you're reading one after the other, because you do begin to see some repetition. You begin to see some themes. Again, permission to be fully human. It gets deeper in your brain the more you read this stuff. So let's open with a word of prayer, and then we will get started. Okay, join me. Dear, gracious, holy God, thank you for the women gathered here this morning and for this beautiful fall day. Allow the change of seasons to remind us that, seasons change in our lives too. Things come and go. We have times of transition. And allow nature to remind us that this is part of the natural process. This is a great unfolding. This is a metaphor for our own lives. And, as leaves turn colors and then begin to fall, help us see messages from you in that as well. Allow us to think about what we need to release. Maybe what transitions we're in. Allow nature to open the door for you to speak to our hearts in a deeper way. Guide our words and thoughts today, God, as we are together in this time of trying to understand the psalmists and find you in their words and find you in our own experiences and our own hearts. Allow us to just feel safe and held by you in unconditional love. God, let us follow the path you would have us follow. Show us the way. In your holy name, amen. All right, so I want to tell you kind of the plan for the day before I get started. We're going to start with kind of a recap of the lament experiences you had last week. And then we're going to talk about who wrote these Psalms that we're reading, who are the authors? Is it David? Is it multiple people? Women have been involved. Then we're going to go into how the Psalms teach us to tune into our feelings and express our feelings. By now, you've seen the vivid language and imagery that the psalmists use. And I hope it's starting to help you describe your feelings a little more broadly, a little more specifically than maybe we are used to doing. And then we're going to talk about how the Psalms give us permission to not be perfect. And that's a big thing for all of us, especially for women, but for all human beings. We live in a society where we are inundated with images of perfection and comparison. And I find a lot of permission to not be perfect in the Psalms. So we're going to talk about that today. And then you're going to hear from one of my most beloved friends, Sherry Danner, who has written a book and is a therapist and coach and boundaries expert. And she's going to talk to us today. We're going to have a conversation, Sherry and I, about permission to not be perfect and shame and releasing shame and her process of writing a memoir. So it's going to be a good day. But let's start with recapping from last week, lament. So if you weren't able to join us, or if you haven't watched the video yet, in a nutshell, lament is complaining to God in faith. And the in faith part is important. It's not just complaining like you would to a friend about how hard life is right now. It is complaining in faith because when you're lamenting to God, you're presupposing a few things. One, that God exists and is your higher power. You are assuming God is listening, because you wouldn't be lamenting if there wasn't somebody listening. So that's faith. And then you are speaking to the fact that you believe God can do something, either to help you, to fix the situation, to guide you or show you the way. You're doing that in faith. So lament can feel like, oh, I'm just wallowing in a pit of despair and feeling sorry for myself. That's not true. It is a way of lifting your struggle to God, asking for help. And so that's kind of lament in a nutshell. And you can watch the video from last week because we spent a lot of time kind of on what that really means. But a couple things I thought about after the class last week was, one is, when we see people go to Jesus in the Gospels for healing, if you look back at those stories, and the book of Luke has the most of the healing stories, because Luke was a physician and maybe had that lens on the world of healing. And so he really tuned into Jesus's healing stories more than some of the other gospel writers. But what you see is the person that needed healing came to Jesus, sought Jesus out, asked for help, assumed Jesus could help them. Many people took risks by going out in society as a leper or a bleeding woman or somebody who had been banished from society to ask for help. So clearly they were putting a lot of stock in the fact that Jesus could help them. And then what we see is Jesus doesn't ask for explanations. Jesus doesn't say, how'd you get yourself in this mess? Jesus doesn't do any shaming. The way we have the stories recorded, there's no judgment. So if we look at the way Jesus had people come and lament and share their pain, that might help you feel a little more comfortable with this model of lament that the psalmists practice. And remember, the Psalms are pre-Christian, pre-Jesus, 1,000 years. Jesus would have grown up reading these, listening to them be taught, likely singing them, praying them. These are very much a part of Jesus's life. And so that shaped his ministry. And so if you are struggling with, I can't tell God I'm struggling or I'm disappointed, and I can't ask God why my prayers aren't answered, go back in Luke and read some of those healing stories and see how those people approached Jesus. And that may help you kind of gain some more insight beyond the Psalms of how this could all work, how this honesty with Jesus and this going to Jesus for help. Those stories might help you a bit. The other thing that I wanted to mention after last week was we ended with a question from the breakout sessions on, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And I sort of wonder what's on the other side of lament, right? Like, am I going to stay stuck in this? Am I going to feel differently about God? I don't want to risk things. And some of you emailed me afterwards, so I'm blending all of those comments together. And those are really great questions. And so I wanted to address that. And then Deanne Sheets, who spoke to you all the first week about her journaling process, she sent me some of her insights on that were really helpful. So I want to share those with you. So on your lament worksheet, so this is out on the class webpage under week 2. On number 5, 6, and 7, the end of the lament worksheet, are these elements of remembering the past when God had shown up for you before and affirming your trust. Deanne's suggestion when she was getting started with writing very honest letters to God was she started with number 5 and would kind of set this tone of remembering where God had been present before and then going into how she felt. And that helped her set the tone for connection with God before the lament. So I thought that was a really good suggestion. If you're struggling with just jumping right in to lament, you might try starting with number 5 and 6 of like, God, you've shown, and some of the psalmists take this pattern. God, you've shown up for me before. I've seen you save the people. You'll hear these kind of lines in the Psalms. Play with that order of things and see if that helps you kind of get into a place where you feel safe to do this. Now I want to open it up to you guys, and I don't know if Deanne's on the call. She might want to add to that. But what did you guys experience with lament this week? Does anybody want to share?
Remember to unmute yourself if you want to share, or give me a wave and I can help you perhaps with that.
I'll speak. I felt like, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I felt like it was just very cathartic. I mean, you think about all these things in little bits and pieces throughout the day, but to actually put the words on paper and to use descriptive words like they did in the Bible. And it seemed at times a little bit dramatic. But I feel like drama has to do with emotion, and the words put emotion on the paper. And it's sort of like, you know, you've had people in your life say, you need to write this out, like what you would say to this person. And either you verbally have the opportunity to say that to that person, or you take that and throw it away. Like you've lamented, you've put it on paper, and either you present it to the person or you destroy it, but that your heart and soul was poured into the words as you would have said it to the person you had a disagreement with. And I just found it very mentally helpful.
Awesome, Kathy. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Yeah. Who else is willing to share?
I have a young friend who's in pre-law and was taking midterms this week and was in a pit. She was in quite a state. And so I found our work last week allowed me to, I sent her a few Psalms that I had read and talked to her a little bit about Philippians, the joy book that we've been talking about in the sermons, and hopefully helped her through it. Also, we had an event Tuesday night that caused people reason for lament, and our political scene is causing people such pain and agony and confusion. And I watched that with my Bible opened Tuesday night and found that helped a lot. And the third thing I found this week that I was able to share from our discussion was my daughter's doing remote teaching, and it is great stress. And so I sent her some of the Psalms that we read, and have talked to her about how God can help her through this if she turns it over to him, and help reduce her stress. And I hope it helped her. It's a difficult thing.
That's beautiful, Linda. Oh, I love that you're in this study right now and finding so many real life applications for the Psalms. That's beautiful. Yeah, and I would encourage you each to start a list in your Bible or on a sheet of paper of things like that, like of the Psalms that really speak to you and what you might use them for, like a quick reference guide. So like Linda knew ones that would be right for a teacher struggling, or for, the political environment we're in right now, or for, any struggle, people that are suffering from illness. There's certain ones that kind of speak to the chronically ill. Start a list for yourself, like a quick reference guide, because that's so helpful. Since you're reading the whole book, you can turn that into a research project to know which ones you want to come back to in the future, or to send to people when they're struggling. That's beautiful. Who else would like to share about their lament experience this week?
I would. I don't know if you can see me.
Perfect.
Just to speak to, when I first started the lament, I thought, what do I have to lament about? I mean, I have kind of a pretty cushy life here. But as I kind of examined it, then the very next day we had Tuesday night. And I had to turn the television down and just be kind of quiet. And I took a lot of notes about what I could pick up from what was being said, and it was so confusing. And I was required to write the opening prayer for my discipleship class, where we're studying Genesis and Exodus. And the concept of saying a corporate prayer based on a lament was so beautiful to me, in that I used what I was reading about the Old Testament, and then used what I was reading about the Psalms, and the lament became corporate for our nation. And I was able to express my just frustration and confusion and bring it out, where I don't think I would have been able to do that had I not been reading and knowing what a lament actually was. Being able to write a corporate prayer in faith, believing God is able.
Oh, Anne, I love that so much. And I feel like all the psalmists in heaven are saying, yes, that's because these were intended. Some of them, this now because you've read 72 of them in a row. Some of them sound like an individual crying out, and some of them sound like a communal, right? And they were used as communal prayers. And I love that you felt that experience. That is a very powerful the whole thing kind of is a powerful process, but what our churches today have gone away from is giving space for lament and worship, and giving space for communal prayer like that. We do a pastoral prayer, but oftentimes the only kind of lament within a pastoral prayer is maybe the time of confession, and that's usually a few seconds of silence where you're lifting individual things. The communal practice of lament is incredibly powerful. And that's, Ann Williams does the longest night service at Resurrection Downtown near Christmas time. So watch for that. That has the closest feeling I've been in to this communal suffering. And I was thinking about that during the debate also, of this is a time where we're all, no matter what side you're on, we're all feeling heavy with this. Everybody's behaving badly, right? And so it's heavy air that we're breathing. And the time for communal lament really applies. I think, I'm glad you noticed that, Anne, because I was similarly thinking that. It looks like Judy was thinking that too. Some others, and Linda mentioned that. So yeah, we're all tuned into the Psalms right now, which is timely for those kind of communal opportunities. Yeah, I see some comments about it felt a little, maybe not comfortable at first or overwhelming and worrisome, but once you do it, it feels a little bit better. That's right. That's why I encourage it as homework, because then you'll kind of make yourself do something that might be scary. And yeah, Lisa, I love this comment about naming my feelings and emotions to be honest with God. That's exactly where we're headed today, is to talk more about that. Yeah, that's you know how good it feels in a human conversation when you say how you feel and you tell the truth and you express yourself and you feel heard, right? We know how good that feels, to feel heard and understood and seen and valued and respected. And that's where I hope we can all get in our relationship with God, that's how we feel in our prayer time, in our lament time, that we're going into this person or this spiritual presence that loves us unconditionally. And with that, we find safety and trust, which gives space to tell the truth. Excellent. All right. Anything else on lament? I don't want to rush too quickly. Speak up if you want to. It's hard on Zoom.
Liz, if you want to share, just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I told you how I put laments out on Facebook, but I don't put God in there so that no one feels offended. But I do the laments and the part where you can put what your own thinking is for something in the top of the Facebook. And I have, they don't let that be shared too. So it's your own writing and it doesn't get shared. But I get the most comments how wonderful it felt to have it, because a lot of people just want to blast out their feelings. But if you just lament about it, it feels better. I put a lament a while back, just as an example of our 16-year-old grandson is in high school, of course, and football's allowed, but he's in band, and so band is not allowed on the field or in football games. So I put a lament about that, and people felt a calming with it. It's things that are real right now. So
Yeah, there's so much to lament about right now.
there is, but it's amazing how kids do adjust.
Yes, they do. Kids are resilient, and we are resilient too. Sometimes we just have to remember that we can be resilient and we can get through this. Yes, I'm glad that this worksheet and the prompts helped. Keep this as a reference, and even, put it in your own words. Make a quick reference sheet for yourself. I want this to be a tool for you and your tool, not just a one-time thing that we did in a class. So create a system where you make this a spiritual practice. And most of us, I love the comment about I was lamenting and didn't even know it. That's right. That's beautiful. And if nothing else, I just want you to feel like you have permission to do that. The psalmists give us permission to do that. There is, I think as women and men of faith, we are wondering, am I doing things right? Am I doing the right things? And we're just constantly wondering that, as trying to be the best version of ourselves always. And in my ministry, I always want to provide evidence of permission to be fully human with God. And so I look for that, and I see that in the Psalms, that we really do have permission to lament, and that they were included in this canon for that purpose, I think, as an instruction guide to how to have an authentic relationship with God. So we will keep talking about that and coming back to that, but continue to do this practice and grow more comfortable with it. Let's move into authorship of the Psalms. So I want to start by sharing one of the great researchers of the Psalms, a biblical scholar who is a professor at UC Berkeley. His name is Robert Alter. And his book on the Psalms, I have it in my office on the desk, is it's like this thick, and it's on your reading list, but he has transcribed them as close to the original Hebrew as anyone I know of, and he's an award-winning author for his book on the Psalms and his book on the 5 books of Moses, which is the Torah. So Robert Alter's kind of goal in life is to go back to the original Hebrew as much as possible. But here's the quote I want to share with you. Authorship is an area that has long been a region of treacherous scholarly quicksand. So I just offered that to you as one of the greatest researchers on the Psalms. He calls it a region of treacherous quicksand. And here's why. As you can imagine, these were created 3,000 to 2,500 years ago. We are sort of confident on dating. And the dating is another treacherous quicksand area. But dating is easier than authorship because of references to world events and kings and leaders. And so you can kind of timestamp things in ancient scripture easier than you can identify the author. Because a lot of things were just not, authors weren't captured. People didn't put their name on the paper. There wasn't even paper, right? These were oral things being passed around. These were like stories at the fireside chat. These were songs being sung. And today we are pretty aware of who wrote the lyrics to that song, whose song is that? And we follow them on social media and we think about authorship a whole lot more. The author's name is front and center on the books we read. We follow their work. That is not how the ancient world worked at all. They were not thinking about 3,000 years ago, these women in Kansas City and across the nation are going to be doing this class wondering who wrote this. We should probably record it. Right? So authorship gets us all tied up in knots today, but that's something that we kind of have to embrace the mystery on, because we could struggle with that to the end of our days and miss the point of scripture if we do that. So with that, I want to say that there is a thought that David authored many of the Psalms. 72 of them, of the 150, or 74, I think, are attributed to David himself. However, the editorial line that says "Le David" for David can mean a poem written for David, a poem written by David, a song written about David, a song written in the spirit of David. All of those are equally correct translations of the David nomenclature on these Psalms. So I would say, if it helps you to picture David, either young shepherd David or King David or David who just messed up with Bathsheba, or regretful David, David in his elder years, if it helps you to picture him writing these, then keep up that practice, because it's possible that he did. But if you are struggling with, is this David? Because I don't like this David, or I can't believe David asked for, the children's heads to be hit against rocks, which is in there, the violence, then also understand these were things floating around in the world at the time. And they might have been attributed to David, but they weren't necessarily authored by him. So there's a couple things in the putting together the great puzzle of authorship in scripture that archaeologists and biblical scholars look at. They look at references throughout scriptures back and forth between the Psalms, which would have been the first form of scripture that we have dated, that was the earliest thing that we have recorded. And then they look at the book of Luke, and in Luke chapter 24, Jesus has returned resurrected and mentions referring to the laws of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms. So then we kind of say, all right, so Jesus read the Psalms, and you do this puzzle piece thing back and forth in scripture. And some people make their entire careers out of this. And now archaeologists are digging deeper, right? We're getting deeper into the earth over the years. So now we're finding things like the deep sea scrolls that many of you may have seen when it was on tour and here at Union Station. Those things are discovered in recent years that are pieces of the bigger puzzle. But we don't have the whole puzzle put together yet. In fact, archaeologists have not dug deep enough to get any evidence of Moses and Moses's work yet. So, you know, in 100 years, in 200 years, will they have dug deeper into the earth to find evidence? Possibly. And we'll have more pieces of the puzzle. But right now in 2020, a lot of this stuff is a scholar's best guess. So I just want to be open with that as much as possible to let you know the research is happening, but there's nothing conclusive. And some, like Robert Alter will say, very few of them were likely written by David. But he's basing that on his theories and his version of the puzzle. So there are times where I feel like David lost in the wilderness, a shepherd that needs hope and rescued, and I will read it in that lens. There are times where I'm mad at the government or the empire or corruption or the institution, and I will read it as a person being oppressed by an empire. You know, so you read it the way it speaks most to you. And try not to get hung up on who is this, where did it come from, is this historically accurate? The Psalms were never intended to be historically accurate. They were intended to be performance art and dramatic. And as Anne said earlier, this dramatic reading, all of this drama, that's the way to be reading it. Read it spiritually, not historically, okay? So that's my 2 cents on authorship. And you can find arguments on all sides of that, but I tried to give you kind of the boiled down version. Now I want to go into, before I leave that. So Psalm 51 is thought to be David having regret for the affair with Bathsheba. Psalm 51 is a great prayer of confession. So if you're looking for something like that, or if you want to go back to 51, you read it this last week. It has the line, you'll recognize this, of create in me a clean heart, O God. Put a new and right spirit within me. Don't cast me away from your presence. It goes on in language like that. So Psalm 51 is a great psalm of confession. And there is some thought that it might refer to David regretting the many things he had done in the Bathsheba incident. But again, it's best guess pieces of the puzzle, but it is a good one to go back to because I know we had a question on that earlier in the class. All right, so let's talk about emotions and feelings. And then next week, we're talking about surrender, just to kind of let you know where we're headed. So we have talked about the discomfort with expressing emotions and feelings already today, and I love your awareness of that and that you're tuning into yourselves on that. And the reason is many of us were never taught that it was okay to feel your feelings or express your emotions. In fact, many of us were taught to shut them down. They were not welcomed, right? They were inconvenient for the adults in our lives. They were disruptive. They were more than people could handle. Our friends couldn't handle our dramatic meltdowns because they were having their own issues. So we quickly learned, my feelings aren't really convenient for those around me and shouldn't be expressed. And you may have grown up hearing phrases like, toughen up, don't cry, don't wear your feelings on your sleeve, be strong, have a stiff upper lip. You know, think about the phrases, I'm blanking on some of the others, but think about the phrases you grew up hearing that might have sent you a message that emotions weren't allowed or appropriate. I remember in my first job, a female manager saying to me, it was in the business world, and she said, never let them see you cry at work. Above all else, act like a man. And I remember hearing that and thinking, okay, I guess that's what you have to do. And I was 24 years old, new into the business world. And so that was deeply embedded in my brain of never be emotional. And now I look back and think, if I could have embraced how I was feeling in some of those meetings, the men actually needed to hear it, right? But I was shutting all that down for fear that that somehow wasn't welcomed in a business world. And now I see why. It's messy, and the people around me don't know how to hold space for that. And so we just get these messages throughout life to shut that stuff down. Shut down your feelings. I don't care how you feel. Just get the work done. Or I don't care how you feel about it. This is the rule. This is how we're going to run this household. I don't want your opinion. And I've done that as a mother. I get it. It's nearly impossible to not invalidate somebody's feelings at some point in your life. But just tune into it now. This is not blame. This is observe without judgment, right? So just observe. Do I feel comfortable expressing myself? Was I ever encouraged to express what I felt or thought or was feeling? And tune into that. That could be part of why we struggle with this. I remember as a mother, when when a child would fall and cut their knee, the words coming out of my mouth would be like, "You're okay. You're okay. It's going to be okay." Right? Well, they may have gotten the message of invalidation. No, it's not okay, Mom. My knee is cut wide open and it hurts. And you're telling me it's okay? I was trying to calm them down, but the invalidation they felt was probably real and valid. So just start to think about some of these things, not with shame and blame, but with introspection and consideration and curiosity and self-compassion and just understanding yourself a little bit deeper. So how many, Michelle, maybe we could do a poll on this. This is on the fly. We didn't have this planned. Could we do a poll on how many people, when they are asked, how are you, say fine versus telling the truth? Let's do a poll on that. So how many people, when you're asked, how are you, say fine, thanks? Or how many say, oh, I'm so glad you asked. I really have something to share with you about how I feel. Okay, so I see Katie's comment, it depends on asking. Or yeah, who is asking? It depends on who is asking. And Deanne, you're too sensitive. Oh, 100%. Oh my gosh, yes. Have you guys heard that? We could do another poll on that one. How many people have heard you're too sensitive as a woman? Yes, and Wendy, definitely working in a male-dominated profession, never let them see you cry. Yeah, Wendy was a physician. Yes, oh my gosh, such good stuff. Yes, Judy, I always say fine, even if I'm not. And Brooke says, I ask people how long they have. This is awesome. Okay, so how many people say I'm fine? Oh, that's fun. Okay. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle's like the wizard behind the curtain that makes all good things happen. So yeah, we're in a society where I'm fine, it's fine, we're fine. And we just push down this expression of feeling. Yeah, Katie, you're right. How are you is like a hello instead of actually wanting to know. It's so true. Yep, Cheryl's saying the same thing. That's right. Okay, 89% of us say I'm fine. And 11% really tell the truth story, which I love. And it's probably like Brooke saying, how long do you have? And I'll tell you the truth. That's awesome. And do you really want to know? Because I could unpack this. Okay, awesome. So start to look at that kind of stuff, because here's what the psalmist says. The psalmist says, I'm not good at all. In fact, the water is up around my neck. I'm sinking in deep mire. I'm weary with crying. My throat is parched. My eyes are dim. People are trying to destroy me. They gossip about me and my heart is broken. What if we downloaded that in the line at the coffee shop? Yes, that's a lot, right? And we know people, one, don't have time nor need to know. And a lot of people aren't capable of responding to that. If we said all of that, I'm deep in mire, I'm up to my neck in water. you know, but how cool if we could support each other through that kind of stuff. And that's what I love about what Michelle does with women's ministry and creating these platforms where we can be real and honest and share these kinds of things. So emotional health is something that I'm sure you have read a lot about, you've heard about it. There's the EQ, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence. These are all things you could Google and learn more about. Start to tune into where you are with that. Are you in tune with how you feel? Are you processing emotions? Are you sharing how you feel with other people? And then, if nothing else, share how you feel with God, because that's the safest place to share it, right? That is, if you don't feel like you have people around you that care or are safe to share it, then at a minimum, give it to God. And as somebody said earlier, God knows how you feel already, but expressing it, God knows, is helpful to us. And I do feel like it's that nod to staying in the conversation with somebody you love. Just like I think I said last week that when my kids get in the car and I say, how are you? And they say, fine, or it was okay, the day was great. I feel more connected to them if they really tell me the details of the day and share what they're feeling. So I have to imagine that God invites that too. So physicians are writing more and more on how blocked emotions lead to chronic pain, make us sick, are a source of disease. Psychologists are writing more and more on how not processing trauma, not processing deep pain ruins our relationships, leads to patterns of self-destruction. Prisoners are finally being taught how to process emotions and traumas, and psychological health is being valued in communities that we thought were hopeless or needed to be punished. So as a society, we're embracing it slowly. We're embracing it a little bit more. People are getting more comfortable with women expressing themselves. And this great feminine movement we have of women finding their voice and speaking more, I hope will contribute to all of us processing emotions better in the generations to come. But this week, one of the things I want you to play with is you will have under week 3 this beautiful feelings wheel that Mackenzie Illusion created for us. And this is based on a feelings wheel that the Gottman Institute, which is, John Gottman is a relationships expert that many of you probably read. So we chose his feelings wheel, but there's a lot of them out there. If you Google images, you'll see this in different formats. But the idea of a feelings wheel is that at the center, you have emotions that come to mind easily, like sad, joyful, scared, mad, powerful, and peaceful. Those are kind of words we're used to using of how I feel. What a feelings wheel does is take you through layers of getting more specific. So if you're sad, are you feeling guilty, ashamed, depressed, lonely, bored, sleepy? It helps you kind of get a little more specific with your sadness. Then beyond that, bashful, stupid, miserable, inadequate, inferior, apathetic. Do you see how that gets at a deeper emotion and a deeper feeling as you move out on this wheel? So this week, this is available to you. And what I want to encourage you to do is in your journaling, in your conversations with people, try to move out on this feeling wheel and use some words that might be more specific to describing how you feel. And let's just practice this. Let's all just get a little bit better at using words to more specifically share how we feel as a human being and what we're dealing with or carrying currently. And then in your conversations with God, try to be more specific. So, God doesn't need us to be specific, but it's a good practice. And what it does is help you hear yourself, helps you realize what you're really feeling. And then it helps you help yourself, and it helps other people know how to help you. If you're feeling, if lonely leads to I'm feeling inadequate, right? That's clarification for somebody to be able to address the feeling of inadequacy, which we all have. So getting a little more specific with people helps them help you. And I think getting more specific in your relationship with God helps you deepen that connection and that trust. And you hear yourself speaking these words or writing these words, and it gives you some insight into what you're feeling inside. So phrases to play with on this are today I feel, fill in the blank. When I think about the future, I feel. When I think about Tuesday night and the debates, I feel. When I think about my past, I feel. I'm feeling this way about this thing because of this. Start to turn your sentences into using more feeling and emotional words. When I think about those I love, I feel, and describe that. Those are all just easy prompts to get you going, because this is what the psalmists do. And you've already picked up on this. The dramatic feeling language is very, very thick in there. But I think it's a call to be introspective. I think it's Alter says that the Psalms are the most introspective book of the Bible. And that really resonated with me because there's so many emotions in this. And it's not a telling of a story, it's a sharing of a feeling. That's really what we have in the Psalms. So start to look for those deeper messages. One more thing, or maybe two. So there is a word you will see in the Psalms called Selah, S-E-L-A-H. You may have come upon it. It appears 70, there's the 74. David wrote 72 Psalms. Selah appears 74 times. That's interesting. But the word appears as a holy pause in the Psalms. So after a deeply emotional stanza, you might see that word. And the holy pause, I think, is really important to notice, because that's a time of take a breath, let this sit in. Allow that emotion to process through you a little bit. And then usually, not always, but after that is the kind of what I'm going to do next. So the psalmist will kind of dump a big emotion out. Then you'll see the word Selah. And then there's kind of a moving forward. And that to me is a metaphor for how we process emotions too. Like, I got to feel this. I got to sit in it. I got to express it. And then a holy pause, or pause with God, sit in the silence, be still and know that I am God. And then the moving forward. So just play with that word in your own lives as a metaphor. I've seen authors write on this, but it's a Hebrew word that just means pause. In songs, in Psalms as songs, S-O-N-G-S, it can mean like a rest in music, in a musical score, when it's quiet and you just let the notes hang in the air. That's such a cool moment in a symphony. That's a holy pause. So think about letting your emotion, expressing your emotions, and then just let it sit in the air. Get comfortable with letting it sit for a second, and then move on through it. That's part of our work as well. So we're going to move into my conversation with Sherry Danner in a few seconds. So I'm giving her a little heads up that we're getting close. But what did the Psalms really do? I think the first time I did a deep study in the Psalms like you're doing now is I really felt permission to not be perfect. I really felt permission to be this messy human who gets herself in messes and calls to God for help, and is mad at people and kind of wants revenge sometimes. And I want karma to take effect. I want the people that are being inappropriate to be punished at some point, or the corruption to be stopped, or, I wanted love to win. And when it didn't happen, I would get angry. Like, how can this be that good people have horrible things happening to them and bad people are getting by with murder? And that I think the Psalms gave me permission to feel all that stuff. It wasn't that we're a bad person for thinking this stuff. It's the human experience we're having. So as you're reading, think about how the Psalms give you permission to not be perfect, how they help you process shame, possibly, how it feels like I'm not alone in how I feel. So, on the Enneagram, if you find somebody your same number, you're so excited because you're like, I get you and you get me. When I find a 7, I'm like, oh, I understand how you go through the world with high energy, but you're really crumbling in a ball at night because you gave it all away, right? We get each other. So that's what I hope you'll do with the Psalms, is like, this person gets what I feel and they're putting it into words, and it helps you feel less alone in your human experience. So let the Psalms remind you that you don't have to be perfect and have it all figured out, and you can wrestle with faith, and you can question God, and you can feel disappointed. That's all part of being human. And I think what I get from the Psalms, if God could teach us what he would want us to get out of the Psalms, I feel like the message would be, you don't have to be perfect, but I want you to be honest. So you don't have to be perfect, but I want you to be honest with me. And that's what I feel like we get out of the Psalms. And that's not what social media tells us. Social media tells us to Photoshop everything and make it as beautiful as possible and have your house look like a magazine shoot is happening every day of your life. So we are inundated with messages of perfection. There is no doubt. And it's something that we struggle deeply with. And as you know, if you have strived for perfection, you know that goal just keeps moving, right? You never achieve perfection. You never feel you're perfect or you got it perfect. The definition of a perfectionist is I'm striving for perfection, but the goal keeps moving, right? It's just, it's never ending. It's never enough. So tune into that, because the psalmists cry out with that too, quite a bit of, I thought I was doing all the right things. I thought I was who you wanted me to be, and bad things are happening. So one of the things that I've had to tell myself in my prayers with God is this, and I learned this from the Psalms, is confession instead of perfection. So I will find when I am nervous with a group of people thinking, I need to have this perfect, I need to impress them, I will think, no, I need to connect with them and confess instead of be perfect, right? I need to say, grace for my imperfection. Perfect. And some of the short ones I could read quickly. I love that, Cheryl. Yes. So confess to God rather than trying to be perfect to God. Does that make sense? So start to get comfortable with, God, I'm struggling. I can't get it all right. That's so much better than trying to come to God as if you have it all figured out. And I think even churches set the tone for this, right? We wear our Sunday best and we shush our children and we don't have coffee in the sanctuary because it's messy. And right, we clean up our act quite a bit for church. And it's out of reverence and respect for God. And it's important. That's all important. But you might be getting the message that God only wants to see perfect. And that's what the Psalms, I think, give us the grace to say, no, it's a messy life and it's okay to bring it to God. Yes, The Gift of Imperfection book by Brene Brown is fabulous on this. She just released a new anniversary edition of it, and it's so good. It's a short book and it's packed with good stuff on accepting imperfection and realizing perfection's not the goal. Connection with God is, and each other is the goal. So I'm going to bring Sherry Danner onto the screen with me, or Michelle. Michelle's going to bring Sherry Danner onto the screen with me. Sherry is a therapist. You may know her from being on staff at Resurrection for 7 years as, our in-house therapy professional, who then also led all of the counselors that many of us went to in our time at church. Sherry that's how I met Sherry when I was a pastor at Resurrection. Sherry was on staff as a therapist and rescued me many times from messy situations and taught me. Sherry was really the reason that I wanted to go into kind of a counseling profession, because I watched what she did and I wanted to do that all day too. But Sherry has written a book recently. And in August, her book came out, and I'm going to show you this beautiful cover. It's called Nurturing the Light Inside. And Sherry wrote this as a memoir. And for me, it's self-help, but it's Sherry's story. And the subtitle is Overcoming Addiction and Codependency on the Path to Self-Love. And I've given it to some clients who absolutely have loved it already. So people are just getting it in their hands and starting to read it. But I'm going to ask Sherry some questions today, and we are going to have kind of an interview. Let's see. Sherry, can I find you?
I've added her. If you're on speaker view, Ginger, you should be able to see the two of you are highlighted. Is that what everybody else is seeing?
No, I just see Michelle right now. Maybe
if I speak, does that help?
Let's see.
It's either Sherry or me.
Well, I've got
Maybe
you both.
that's just me.
Are you on speaker view, Ginger?
Yes, and I just see you right now, Michelle.
Well, switch back and forth from gallery to
Oh,
speaker
okay.
view. See if you.
Okay, Deanne said she sees both. Deanne, do you see both at the same time?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, then we're good. It's just great. Okay, Sherry. Hi, Sherry.
Hi.
So it's going to be so fun because you are one of my very favorite people to talk to. And so I get to do that today, which is such a treat. So Sherry, you started writing this book 2 years ago, and you entered into the process of writing memoir and kind of looking back at the pivotal moments in your life and sharing those with all of us. So what was the process of going back and writing your story like for you?
Well, as you know, hello everybody, good to be here. It was excruciating in many ways. You were there from the beginning, and also just the most important work that I've done for myself too at the same time. And I've always been a believer in writing, in the power of writing. I've been a journaler my whole life. I think I only know myself because I'm a writer, and I have always loved that. So I believed in the power of writing, but to write for someone to read something is a whole other animal. So I learned pretty quickly when I decided I wanted to try writing, just because I was dreamed of that, I learned that it's very difficult. So I decided to enroll in a program and get some instruction in writing. So that was just the fulfillment of my own personal dream. But it coincided with this feeling like really was a nudge from God that I was meant to write this book for my own evolution in terms of honoring my own voice, honoring those stories. And whether anybody ever read it or not, I truly, this, there were times when I really thought maybe I wouldn't even just publish it. I would just write it for myself. And that would have been really just cathartic in itself. But you helped me get over that. But anyway, the reason I really wanted to write it and felt called to write it was I was always moved and changed by reading memoir. And especially memoir by women. I was struggling with addiction all those years before you could just Google everything in the privacy of your own home. There weren't all the stories, so I'd go into the bookstores and the self-help and in the library, and I read all the memoirs from any woman who ever wrote about addiction. And that just, I felt so much less alone, so much less crazy. And then I read Glennon Doyle Melton. She was Melton at the time. She wrote Love Warrior. And when I read that, it really rocked my world, because I thought, this is a Christian woman writing about what it's like to wrestle with Christianity in a patriarchal system. And I just read it. I was like, oh, we can say this stuff? This is very exciting. Because she was so raw, so honest and blunt, and it really just made me feel like so validated and less alone. And then the Me Too movement happened, and I thought, I just want to be brave. I want to be a part of this revolution of women, of this feminine, what did you call it? Feminine something.
Oh, no.
Like uprising or something about this. There's an energy that's happening, and I feel that. I think we're all kind of like, that's why we're doing this. That's why everybody's so excited with what you're doing, Ginger. It's like you're speaking into something that we're craving, And so when this all kind of came together, and I had some stories to tell, and I decided, we all do, but I also love to write, and I wanted to try and put this out there and learn how to honor my own voice. And so that's kind of how it came to be.
Oh, I remember, so Sherry and I would have calls every 2 or 3 weeks and just check in with each other. And we were both trying to put ourselves out there over the last 2 years more and more, and get vulnerable and be more authentic. And so we were just supporting each other in that journey. And, as you would tell me about what you were feeling as you wrote the book, or even resistance that was coming up of, because it's a huge process. I have a few books in process, and it is so hard to work on them. To sit down and work on them is a hard thing. So one, I admire you so much because you birthed this baby. This is a real tangible book that is in the hands of people. So that alone is a huge accomplishment. And then, to write memoir is a whole other level of commitment and dedication and emotional unpacking. And when you would describe to me what you were working on, I would literally feel this like body chill or kind of an intuitive hit or a nudge from God. I call it all the same. That was like, this is going to help people. This is a lifeline that women need. Somebody needs to be telling the truth of their story so that we can do what you did with other women authors, which was feel less alone, because we all have similar experiences that we're shaming ourselves for or criticizing ourselves for. And to me, that keeps us from living into the potential that God sees for us. And so thank you for being brave. From the millions of people that will read this book in the future, thank you for being brave.
Thank you for that. That really does validate what I hoped. I really wrote it as a love letter to women like me, and there are lots of us. And I knew that going in because of being a therapist for so many years and hearing story after story after story that was all so similar of our difficulty finding our own value when we're taught that our value is in our appearance or in our ability to be pleasing or to hold a family together or whatever it is that the culture says that's what makes a good woman. Yeah. And trying to live up to that impossible perfectionistic standard.
Yes.
And then how we shame ourselves and feel not good enough. And then what comes of that is behaviors that we then shame ourselves for more. So I knew going in that what I was writing would be relatable. What I hoped was that people would read it and feel something for themselves by feeling something for me,
Yeah.
and then we get to kind of free each other a little bit.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Amen. Yes, that's exactly right. And I didn't mention you were a therapist prior to coming to work at Resurrection, a therapist in private practice while you were working at Resurrection, and you continued to go to be a therapist after you went back to full-time private practice, and now you've become a boundaries coach. And so I think your deep awareness of the importance of processing emotions and feelings comes from the thousands of people you have helped learn to process emotions and feelings. And there's this great line in your book of you describing how, and I noted this line because it went with the Psalms stuff today. When we were, when we were younger and even still, my feelings tended to go deeper into hiding the bigger they grew. And I love that because, I think about when we are infants, we're communicating our emotions, right? I'm hungry, I'm bored, I'm mad, I'm tired, do something for me. But then as we learn language, we actually also are picking up that my feelings are inconvenient for you and maybe I should suppress them. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that I'm angry or I'm sad and so I loved that line of when my feeling, that they went more into hiding as they became bigger feelings. It made me think of, we learn language to express ourselves, but we're also picking up on, oh, I'm not allowed to tell you how I feel now. And so do you see that, or do you find when working with people that we're conditioned to quiet our emotions and we almost have to relearn it to express ourselves?
Much. And I, of course, can't speak for everybody, but we have seen this over and over and over again. And I was really careful in the book not to in any way criticize my parents, but the truth is I came from a family where emotions really were not allowed. Happy was allowed, but that was about it, and that's only because that's what they were taught. They were doing their best, and they taught me that behavior mattered. You behave your way to a good life. And maybe that works for some people. And I think, but if you are wired a certain way, then we start thinking about the Enneagram, and we think about being a sensitive person, which I was, and being hyper tuned into emotion, but nobody was talking about it. And so it was, like pressing the ball down in the water, where's that going to go? It's going to come up, so it in the book, I'm really writing, I think, about what happens when we don't have any process for understanding our own emotions, honoring our own emotions, because then we think that whatever we're feeling, if it's not a good feeling, then it's bad, and therefore we're bad. And then it just sort of compiles and it becomes this way of living that turns into shame, which is, Brene Brown talks about shame as that feeling that something is inherently wrong with us and we're unlovable. Yeah. And then it compounds, because then you behave out of that place. And then maybe you get into bad relationships, which I did. You get into addictive behaviors, which I did. And it just becomes this sort of monster. So yes, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this obviously is an exciting topic for me, because learning to understand my own feelings has been a game changer for sure.
And how did you learn to do that?
Yeah, a lot of study and I've got a train going by. Sorry, everybody. A lot of intentional study and recognizing that, I think this is the key, and it's really kind of sad that we aren't a little further along there.
Yeah.
And then becoming a therapist, of course, getting out of addiction. If you have an addiction or anything you're motivated to change, or that you find you must change, you have to find a new way. So you have to look at what's not working, and then figure out, well, if that's not working, what might be working? And then I was very fortunate to have resources to get help and to have therapy. Not a ton of it. I didn't have a lot of money to put into that, but I would go even once every few months and then make a lot of that session, and really I started investing in learning and reading everything I could. Even before I became a therapist. And then once you become a therapist, that's your whole world, right? You're really immersed in it, and you're meeting with people, and you're learning more and more about it, and you're seeing it. You're seeing how this is really a universal problem that causes so many other problems, right?
Right. Yes, the layers of problems upon the original problem. Yes. Yes, so that people know that haven't yet read your book, you dealt with alcohol addiction prior to becoming a therapist, and was your experience with addiction and shame early in life part of why you wanted to become a therapist, to help other people?
Oh, totally. I didn't know what else I was going to do with all that, So I've got to make use of all this, and I write in the book that I recognize the irony that I got out of rehab and went right into a graduate program to become a therapist. And I was divorced and morbidly obese, and just had all these really, really extreme situations, the loss by suicide of a recent partner. I mean, there's so many things that would say, what are you doing? But I knew that those were the things that would actually make me a good therapist. I knew that once I turned the corner and was really on the path of my own emotional health. I mean, I turned a big corner, and it was late in life. So I was 38 when all this happened, later in life. So I turned the corner and then went into grad school and became a therapist. But then there was this sort of disconnect between the old life and the new life. And that's where I started to feel like I'm kind of still hiding, because I haven't really talked about any of this. Mm-hmm. When you become a therapist, you're kind of a blank slate by design. Mm-hmm. And so at a certain point, I realized I'm kind of doing the same thing I was doing before. I'm hiding behind helping people, and it's good and I love it, but I think I need to come out in front of the curtain a little bit in order for me to evolve and really own the story. And so I did switch to coaching. I noticed in the chat someone asked, what's a boundaries coach? And we will talk about that. But I moved to coaching. It's just a little bit of a different modality in working with people. But mostly it freed me up to feel like I just want to tell people who I am. And then with coaching, people who identify me as the right person to work with them through my story. Very different than how therapy works.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. And I think that what you do for your clients, so in setting boundaries, it starts with self-worth and, knowing that you are worth having designing a boundary and then keeping it with friends and family and what you say yes to and what you say no to. And there's this excerpt in your book so first of all, reading Sherry's book was like a permission slip for me to feel human and okay with not being perfect. So the Psalms give me scripture that says that, and Sherry's book gave me somebody's story that said that. So I think it's such a perfect companion to this Bible study that we're doing right now. But here's on page 114, if somebody has the book with them. But over my many years of trying to understand and free myself from alcohol addiction, I released loads of shame, primarily through therapy, coaching, and reading about others like me. I replaced my rigid perfectionist thinking with curiosity and self-compassion. These days, I focus on embracing the messiness and mystery of being a human. My favorite part of me is my backstory, all the mess behind me that proves how fallible, deeply flawed, and incredibly resilient I am. Somewhere along this journey, I fell in love with my human consciousness, with the wild ride of being a soul in a human body. I accepted the truth that allowing the most primitive part of my brain to run the show came at the cost of losing everything good about being alive. I think that's one of my favorite sections of that. There's so many. I have so many underlined and starred, but oh, Sherry, that's what you do for people. And that's powerful. I've seen you do it for me. I've seen you do it for so many women, that you help them understand what they're experiencing as part of being human. And there's this beautiful soul within them that is pure love and pure grace. And when we remember that as the core of our being, as the essence of who we are, then we can embrace life with curiosity and self-compassion. Will you speak to that and how because in sentences, you sum up, I think, our whole purpose in life right there. How did you have that wisdom when you were in the pit of dealing with your challenges? How did you know you were a soul worthy of surviving this and coming out of it and looking back on it with gratitude that now you could teach it and help women?
Well, I certainly didn't know it when I was in the pit, right? And just hearing you read that, I think that's where it feels like it feels really good to hear that. It's beautiful. I like her, and that's the best part, is to be able to say, to learn to love yourself and like, oh yeah, I wrote that and I meant that. And I like to hear it, and I'm not going to be bashful and go, oh, it was nothing. Or, I believe all of that and I live all of that. And I think we've earned that, when we've reached this point where we have overcome what we've overcome. And so I just love it. And I know parts of that, you and I both love the idea of understanding the primitive brain. So there's a lot of study that goes into understanding what makes us human and how God created that brain. Therefore, we can love that brain wants me to eat brownies all the time, right? But my mind can say, not really a great idea. But instead of shaming myself, like what I used to do, like make it a moral problem if I'm not, if my brain wants things, or if I have thoughts or feelings that are unacceptable, or, and then you think, well, if I were a better person, I would have more control of myself, instead of, oh, my brain wants something because God created my brain and it likes dopamine a lot. And if I give it some, it wants some more tomorrow. And that's not a moral failing. That's just my brain functioning. And then I can make decisions about that. And I can do hard things, right? I can decide to not have brownies, not as a punishment, but because I have a higher brain that says, you might feel better if you didn't.
Yeah.
you know? So I love that passage, and I love that you brought that up, and the self-compassion piece of it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, really, if we could approach our lives with curiosity, and our feelings and our emotions with curiosity and self-compassion rather than judgment,
Mm.
that's a game changer.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I really feel like scripture and the teachings of Jesus are saying, but we get confused sometimes and we lose it.
Yes.
In, you know, in other ways we lose those core messages of love and compassion that we are supposed to feel for ourselves. And yes, that is totally the lane you and I love to talk about and teach on, because it's been transformative to both of us in our own lives, and all the women that we work with. You have this powerful encounter with God too in your book. There's a couple of them that you know, like the psalmist, you cry out to God and or pray to God for guidance and answers and just, you know, help, and you feel a response from God, and it was a very real experience. And I know women in this class have had it. Deanne spoke to it, and yet some people still wonder, like, what is that like, and how does that work? And I love the way you describe it in your book, and you know, will you share with us what you felt God saying to you in that moment?
Yeah, so there's a chapter in the book, I called it Tantrum. And that's not really to be minimizing of the experience, but I just recognized at a certain point that I had been throwing a tantrum for a very long time. And I wasn't really aware that I was doing it. So this story, and I'll read a little bit from the book of it, that it was about almost exactly 5 years ago, and I had overcome the alcohol addiction. I had really reinvented my life. I had let go of the codependent relationships. I was professionally really where I wanted to be, but I was still very overweight, and I was really ready to kind of tackle that. So I say that because for me to have these sort of communication with God and to really receive messages, I'm responsible for the readiness. I have to be ready and open. And then I don't direct when it comes, but if I'm ready and I'm kind of open the door, I notice then I can hear the message. So I will share this from a little bit from the book. And it starts on 119. One October afternoon, I was in my bedroom drying my hair when a familiar thought crossed my mind, but struck me as important in a new way. I put the hairdryer down and sat motionless, listening. If weight loss is simply a math problem, what's really stopping you? The whispered question came from deep inside with no trace of judgment or condemnation. I became aware that God was present with me in the quiet room. I don't mean God as a white-haired old man or an apparition. The God I experienced that day wasn't outside of me at all. Rather, the God I felt was the origin of light, love, life, and me. A God as faceless and genderless as time was both with me and inside me. I know it's supposed to be simple, I thought. Consume fewer calories, burn more calories, but there's so much more. You just don't understand, came my silent, defiant answer. I'd like to understand. What do I not understand? Well, it's just not fair. Oh, came the response. The gentleness of the response made room for something inside me to open up. Until that moment, I'd had no idea of the anger I carried. But there it was. Slowly, over the moments that followed, I recognized how deeply that anger ran. I was enraged by what struck me as the unfairness of it all, and I mean everything. I was angry over the fact that babies die, that human beings are born into hellish conditions they never escape, that the wrongfully accused are imprisoned, that unspeakable acts of viciousness are depicted on the news for our entertainment, that kids are cruel to each other and leave lifetime scars, that no law guarantees justice or equality. I was angry that so many teenagers are depressed, anxious, addicted, and suicidal. I was mad that I did not seem to fit in anywhere and never had. Mad about all I had lost and that my heart was so broken. I was even mad that I couldn't find anybody to be mad at anymore. And I was especially mad that I was expected to face all of this without a smoke or a drink or some good old-fashioned relationship drama. Couldn't I at least have the freaking donuts? And then it hit me. For years, I've been throwing a prolonged tantrum while God patiently waited for me to wear myself out. The world was not set up to my liking, thank you. Life was harder than I'd prefer. As this inner dialogue unfolded, I saw that I had a choice. I could continue crafting my strongly worded letter of complaint, or I could let us both off the hook. God for not making life easier, and me for expecting things I had never been promised, and resenting the fact that I had never gotten them. God and I sat together and considered my dilemma with compassionate curiosity. I was ready to listen. In a clear voice, which felt to me like God speaking to me and through me, God told me, being angry at reality is a child's game. You got stuck when you started turning to substances to soothe your pain, which kept you from getting this sooner. But you're getting it now, and that's good. Yes, the world is a hard place, but you were specifically created to be part of it, and your light is needed by others. When you fight with yourself and me, when you try to escape the natural hardships of life, you create false reality that is unnaturally painful and not at all what I intended for you. The natural pain that comes with being alive is not a punishment. Heartbreak is not an exception. These are part of the human experience. Once you stop longing for things to be different or trying to find ways around the parts that are hard, you become open to a different kind of pleasure and beauty. As I listened to this message unfolding inside me, I didn't shake my fists, break down and cry, or fall to my knees, actions that I had previously thought accompanied moments of spiritual breakthrough. The encounter was remarkably undramatic. I just suddenly knew. I finally knew that the hardest things about my life have been caused by my attempts to avoid the hardest things about life. I knew that the things I had not been equipped to handle when I was young, I was equipped to handle now. My internal war, which had started when I was a teenager, was over by the time my hair was dry. My battle with reality had only taken about 4 minutes to resolve. 30 years and 4 minutes.
Oh, that is a work of art.
Thank you.
It's so beautiful. And yeah, oh, Sherry, there's so much in there. And I think it just, I don't even want to put words to it because it so beautifully stands on its own. I hope the women on this call, I hope you soaked that up. And if not, go back and watch this video and just go to this portion and close your eyes and allow Sherry's voice to message to you what I feel God would say to each and every one of you. That's powerful and so beautiful. And one of the lines that I think we've talked about is, you know, the psalmist crying out of, am I being punished for something, right? And you have this line that God delivered to you of the natural pain that comes with being alive is not a punishment. And that is just such an important line, and that heartbreak is not an exception. These are part of the human experience. And once you stop longing for things to be different or trying to find ways around the parts that are hard, you become open to a different kind of pleasure and beauty. And I think that's the hard part with trusting that, right? Trusting that if I go into the hard, if I'm willing to cry out and get messy with God and myself and really put it all out there, the beauty that's on the other side of that is so worth it, but we're so afraid to open up to that.
And it's not that it feels great all the time, right? I mean, the beauty of living sober, and it's not like it's happy every day. You when you release the things that soothe your emotion, like, or that you escape emotion with, and you step into life the way God intended, you have anxiety. And then you have to learn how to deal with anxiety. But that's what's so cool, because I think God wants us to learn that. That's why we have faith, right? Anxiety is just fear of the unknown. And faith is believing that we will be okay. And so constantly re-encountering that and living in that, being willing to live in the anxiety of the unknown and not buffer against that with something that makes it, that alters our reality, like for the moment, like I just want to step out of this. I mean, I still do sometimes. It's like, couldn't I just step out of this for a minute? Reality is so harsh sometimes, but it's actually, the beauty is in there, right? If you buffer from the hard, you don't get the joy either. And so the joy in it is astounding.
Oh, so powerful. Oh my gosh. Yes. And people in the comments, I'll send these comments to you so you can read them. But yes, and your words are touching us so deeply. And, you know, it is at the back of your book, you have these sections of kind of teaching. So the first part is memoir with beautiful self-reflection questions after every essay. And you did your, you know, I know we have other people wanting to write memoir in this group of women. In Sherry's book, the way you structured it was so cool because it's like essays. Was it easier for you to take that approach to writing memoir?
Oh, totally. I never could have sat down and written the whole thing. That would make, I just couldn't do it. So I also wanted to model this. Like, you can tell a whole story in a little, you know, section. Tell it in small bites, you know, if you want. I really kind of wanted to model that because that's the only way I could do it. It's overwhelming to try to think, for me, to think about doing it in a more chronological. So mine's not chronological. It's really more me now kind of looking back, and each essay could really almost be standalone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
and
really
the second half, as you're talking about, is more the self-help, which I felt like some of the essays sort of begged for a little bit of like, maybe follow up, because I have training now and had been a therapist and now I'm a coach. So I did incorporate some just thoughts on things like alcohol addiction and my experience with that, and codependency, which is something that I've learned to understand myself in a way that's helpful and not shaming, and thoughts on losing 100 pounds, which is really, you know, not about how to do it, but sort of the mindset that I would recommend for anybody who's facing, you know, that challenge of a lot of weight that they're uncomfortable with. And then the boundaries, which is what, you know, so boundaries to me are a great gift. And I think they're so misunderstood. I think we think of boundaries as walls or as lines we draw to keep people out. So I just want to be an ambassador for boundaries. I love them. I think they really allow us to honor God in the way that we're meant to, by containing the things that we are meant to be good stewards of, which is our time and our energy and our light, which we have endless love to give, and there's an endless faith, but we have limits on our time on this earth, and we have limits on our energy. And so I think we're called to sort of make hard decisions about that. And a lot of times those are boundaries, like expressing what we believe and where we're going to put our time, where we're going to put our energy, and making hard decisions about that. And a lot of times we don't, because we're afraid we'll hurt people's feelings. Right? That's the biggest reason that we don't say no to things. Well, someone's feelings might be hurt. But I think what we really mean is I'm afraid I'll feel guilty. So there's the challenge is, okay, well, let's talk about how we handle guilt. What do you want your relationship with that to be? And is that worth the price or not? Maybe it is. That's an individual decision. But I like to help people sort through like why they're doing what they're doing, why boundaries are hard. And usually it's because of our people-pleasing training, right? We're taught not to say no. We're taught always to give. And I'm all about the giving. I just think we can give so much more when we're really lit up inside, and when we've kind of protected and contained that energy in a way that's really honoring.
Yeah, you were the first person I heard address the theology of boundaries. And I love that. And we've had conversations about that. And I think it's so important to think about boundaries for yourself in service to God, right? And that container idea of, I only have so much time and energy to fulfill, my callings, my relationships. And if I am giving myself away to things that don't light me up, that is a disservice to what I could do to serve God. And, and that we are created with potential, and we have to be stewards of that potential. And what you helped me see in my own life is that if I am feeling resentful, it is because I didn't set a boundary up front. And if I don't set a boundary, this will end in resentment. And because as I say yes to so many things and projects and the work I love to do, but somehow if I don't set some boundaries for myself, then it crosses over a line to draining me and becoming resentful. And it's not my best self, and I'm not serving God. You really helped me see theologically why boundaries are important. And because I think some women, we tend to think boundaries seem selfish.
Totally. We're taught that. And I'm just saying, let's look at that. Where did that come from? And who is that serving? Is that serving you really? Do you believe that really? And if you do, that's, you're right. I don't. I think it's actually more of a fear-based behavior usually. So if you want to be driven by fear and guilt and obligation, then you're probably going to feel terrible all the time.
Yes.
And so one phrase I heard some years ago that I embraced is become a resentment prevention specialist. So I try to be a resentment prevention specialist, which means that if I'm going to tell myself I will not operate in resentment,
right,
then I am forced to say, well, what am I going to do then about that? Who do I need to say something to? And then it's just a matter of how. And that's a lifelong art of being kind and thoughtful and considerate. And that's just a practice. You get really good at it once you decide you're going to do it. You don't give yourself a choice. Like, no, I'm definitely going to say no to that party. Now it's how.
Yes.
How am I going to do it? And try to take as much care as I can in the messaging, but then release the fact that if the person's disappointed, I can't, that's not my business to control or manage that. Disappointment is part of life, right? And it's not my job to make sure everybody in the world isn't disappointed. I mean, that was my job for a really long time. Yeah. I was very bad at it.
Yes. We feel so responsible for everybody's feelings.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody in the house, how are they feeling? What am I doing well? Am I being the person they need me to be? Am I playing the role?
If somebody's upset, I've done something wrong. Exactly. And how can I fix that? And so then many of us are operating out of that. And I'm just suggesting, let's take some time to look at what's driving that. And do you like those reasons or not? If you don't like those reasons, then let's find some different reasons. And then what I do as a boundaries coach is help people gently move towards, at their own pace, in their own way, how they want to express themselves differently in the world. Because it's hard. It's really hard.
It is hard. Oh, you are so good at what you do, and you are so called. I mean, I look at you and see a divine assignment playing out, that God so equipped you for this work and redeemed the areas of shame that you had in your life, or the messiness of your early chapters. It's such a story of redemption now, in how you're serving the world by helping other people and teaching what you learned from the pit. I think that's part of, our responsibility of coming out of the pit, and not to add pressure, because I know, I'm good at that, pressure on myself, that I have this responsibility. But there is this, what do I do with this experience? How could I help somebody else soften the pit of their despair by offering my story as a lifeline, or as a opportunity to feel less alone in the world? It really is a redemption story of how we use the tough stuff we go through to serve others on, from a healed place.
And you don't have to write a book to do it, right? I mean, or be a coach or a therapist or a speaker. You know, we all have these stories, and we all have the capacity to share in the quiet ways. It's happening in the corners. It's happening that when we shine the light on shame together, shame dies. It just cannot survive the light, but it loves to live in the dark, you know? So finding a safe person, a safe place to share your stories. And then you can, you know, that's the beauty, is when you can see somebody else that you see is just beautiful and precious, and they're in this shame. It really helps you see what you're doing to yourself.
That's right. Oh my gosh, yes. There's a question, do you work virtually? Sherry, do you want to talk a little bit about your work?
I work only virtually. You know, I left my private practice in 2018, and I moved closer to my parents who live in Wichita. They're elderly, and I just wanted to be with them in their late years and taking care of them. So I got on this Zoom thing like 2 years ago before anybody even knew what it was. I was doing it, and love it. So I really love it for this purpose. I don't love it for everything, but I love it because it allows this kind of learning. And I love it for coaching because it's very specifically, you know, it's a very intense kind of conversation that you're having. So I love it. I do work virtually. That's what I do now for full time, and love to work with, particularly with nurturing people who have trouble nurturing themselves. You know, that's really who I am and was, and I understand that. So people that find the word self-love maybe hard to embrace because they think it's selfish, you're my people, right? So it's like with what you do, right?
Yes, you and I, yes. And a lot of times we work with people together, right? And it's powerful stuff, absolutely. So we're going to go into a breakout session because time flies when I'm talking to Sherry, and time just flew. But what I would invite you all to do is, in your breakout sessions today, share what you experienced growing up in the way you were taught about emotions and sharing feelings. What was your home like? What messages might you have received that are deeply embedded now that keep you from feeling comfortable with sharing feelings and emotions and tuning into that inner world that is going on in your mind all the time? So share that in the breakout groups and talk about what you heard Sherry say, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes or so on the other side and close out today. But I'm going to put, in case you have to go, I'm going to put Sherry's email in here. It's sherry@nurturedlight.com. Did I get that right? Yes. Okay, so sherry@nurturedlight.com is Sherry's email. And Sherry is more than happy to answer questions. She told me this beforehand, that if there are questions, or you want to discuss any points further with her, please reach out to her via email. I can't say enough about how much I trust you and love you, Sherry. You hold space for me to do the work that I do, and I'm so grateful for that. And you're just such a beloved friend. And thank you for being brave and for sharing your story today. I want all the women in the world to know about this book. I will say too, yes, you can purchase her book on Amazon. Sherry's website is Nurtured Light, Sherry? Nurturedlight.com. And you can find out more on her website too about where to purchase her book. I know it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle. Sherry, do you want to say anything else to that?
Just thank you, you know, and you helped me understand that part that I read. I didn't understand the connection to the psalmist, you know, and that was a lament. You gave me just this understanding of what that meant, and that, you know, so thank you for what you're doing for making the Bible safe for me in a way. I've said this to you before, but I really mean it. You're inviting me into this understanding that I know you're doing that for a lot of people. And I thank you, and I love you very much.
I thank you. So we'll go into breakout groups, and then we'll see you all on the other side to close out. All right. Wow. I'm just reeling, processing all the things Sherry said and all the things we've talked about today. I do want to tell you, so let me pull the chat back up. Yes, okay, good, it's all still there. So Sherry's website is nurturedlight.com. Sherry's email is sherry@nurturedlight.com, and her book is available on Amazon and other resellers. You could find that on her website, but I highly, highly recommend this. It's a great gift. You know, we're going into gift season, but just take the time to read this and let her words speak to you. She is such a gift to the world. Sherry will be speaking in the online community I have called Compassion Fix Community. You can read about it at compassionfix.com, but Sherry's going to be teaching us about boundaries on November 2nd in that group. That's the day before the election. So it's a good time to do a quick review of boundary setting, and also going into the holidays. So November in the community is going to be about boundaries, and Sherry's going to kick that off, that month off for us with a lesson, and then we're each going to kind of work on how we do that better in our lives to protect ourselves and to protect those we love and give our best selves. Does anybody have questions for me before we go? Sherry's going to take questions on email, but I want to offer you a chance. If you have any questions going into this week of the reading, you're going to read book 3, which is Psalm 73 to 89. So a little bit shorter this week, so you get a little break. So extra time to journal would be wonderful, and work on expressing your feelings this week. Those would be good things to work on. Anything else? Michelle,
How do we get into the Compassion Fix community?
If you click on it, Kim, on my website, actually, Kim, I'll send you an email so you don't have to voice prompt
Okay,
it.
great. And then, all right. And then so I can join it and get into the Zoom links on there.
Yes, I'll help you, Kim.
Okay,
We'll
great.
follow up.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Michelle,
And I'll just, my apologies for the Zoom link being difficult this time. I'll rework that, make sure I clean that up and change any settings that might be necessary. So thank you all for being patient and for mastering Zoom. It does not have the final word.
I know, and in Michelle's defense, I think they're doing updates a lot. And sometimes when there's a new software update, it changes our settings. I've had that same thing happen. All right, anything else before we go? Next week, we're going to talk about surrender, and that's not easy. So I'm going to do my best to help us all learn, me included, how to do that a little bit better. And there is a little kind of formula methodology that we can learn, sort of like lament, to surrender. But I'd like for you to be thinking about that this week going into it. I'm going to give more space for community discussion with all of the women on here next week. So be thinking about the topic of surrender. And we're going to hear from Brooke Lottis, who is this phenomenal woman who's part of this class. So you might have met her in breakout sessions. She is on staff at Village Presbyterian. She has an amazing story of resiliency that she's going to share with you. And surrender is one of the areas in her personal life she has really worked to kind of get better at. She's been forced to surrender and had to choose surrender many times. So she's going to share her amazing story and her faith journey with you next week. So that'll be another powerful one. These women are just blowing my mind. All of you are. I love to hear from all of you your stories. So be thinking about surrender for next week. Continue to read, continue to immerse yourself in it. If you've gotten behind, go back, sit outside in the sun this weekend and just catch up. Let yourself have that spiritual experience with the psalmist. It's pretty powerful. And for those of you that have been doing it, thank you for sharing your stories with us. It helps to know that it is touching you in a new way and speaking to you. That's beautiful. Let's see. Anything else in the chat? Michelle, have I missed anything that you've seen?
I don't think so. I
Okay,
think
good.
it's Just been a wonderful class. So grateful to get to experience community in this way. If everybody wants to switch over to gallery view, I'm gonna unspotlight Ginger just so that you can see one another, go through your screens and see all these wonderful faces. This is our community and it works online for the most part.
I'll close
Ginger?
us out I'll close us out in a
Okay.
quick prayer. Oh, dear gracious God, thank you so much for this time together today and the technology to enable it to happen. These are gifts from the amazing brains you've created in the human race right now. We have these gifts that we can better learn about you and connect with you and seek you. Bless Sherry for her bravery in writing this book that will touch so many lives. It is truly a lifeline. To me, it feels like such a divine assignment that you gave to her, God, and you supported her through. And through the writing of it, through the publishing of it, through the conversations about it, God, I can just see you and feel you with her every step of the way. Continue to bless her as she serves people so beautifully with her coaching. She is a bright light on this planet. Thank you for our paths crossing and for all of the women to get to hear from her today. Bless Michelle and Lane and all of the women that are working behind the scenes to make this class possible and produce these videos. And every woman in this class, be with them this week. In your holy name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Have a great week.